Torrell Peterson was a child who died from severe abuse at the age of 5 from his foster mother, while he was supposed to be under the supervision of the Fulton County Department of Family and Children's Services. Torrell was born in Atlanta, Georgia in 1992, with cocaine in his blood to a crack cocaine-addicted mother. From 1992 to 1995, there were at least 7 calls to the police on record reporting his mother's behavior. The reports included locking children in their rooms, denying them food and water, using welfare money to buy crack, children begging the neighbors for food, using drugs while pregnant, and leaving the children alone with their sick maternal grandmother. These calls were handled by 11 caseworkers and 10 supervisors. However, it wasn't until June 1996 that the Child Welfare Agency urged Torrell's mother to give up custody of him, handing guardianship over to Wino Peterson, the grandmother of his half-brother and sister, Tasha, who was 11, and Tommy, who was 6, his aunt Terry Lynn, and her boyfriend Calvin Pittman, who also lived in the household. There were many procedures that went unfollowed when Torrell was put into his foster mom's care by the Department of Family and Children's Services. When a foster child is placed into a foster home, they are supposed to get monthly visits by their caseworker, and by no means are the foster parents ever allowed to use any sort of punishment that involves spanking, hitting, or otherwise causing pain as punishment, and usually children are to be placed with blood relatives, which Wino was not. Torrell was never checked on, so his family got away with abusing him. It wasn't until December 3, 1996, that another report was made to the DFCS. Police and medical records showed that he had been taken into the Hughes Spalding Hospital several days before by his mother. Torrell was visiting her for the holiday, and she discovered that he was completely covered in marks and bruises. When Torrell was questioned about his recent beating, police reports stated that he said it was because he urinated in his clothes. When the doctor asked Torrell how he was beat, he said his grandma did it with a white shoe and 2 belts, and held up 2 fingers to show what he meant. A police investigator, A.C. Booker, was called into the emergency room where the doctor told her Torrell had been a victim of long-term abuse. The investigator wrote, "As I looked at little Torrell's body, most of his injuries were old. However, he had marks, scars, and lacerations about his body. His injuries included right forehead and ear badly scarred, mark patterns, buttocks swollen and tender, lower back marked, as well as the left forearm." The mother was advised not to hand Torrell back over to his grandma. The same night, police arrested Wino with reckless conduct, a misdemeanor for beating her grandson. Wino was ordered to appear at Atlanta Municipal Court. Torrell was supposed to be taken to court by a caseworker named Cheryl Elmore so he could testify. However, for some reason unknown, Cheryl Elmore neither brought Torrell to court or showed up on his behalf. Since there was no victim in court to testify, the municipal court judge, Catherine E. Malicki, simply dismissed the abusive charges against Wino Peterson. Cheryl Elmore then created a fake report that she put in Torrell's file, stating that the judge believed Miss Peterson and did not feel she was guilty of child abuse, even though Torrell never made it to court for a trial. This sealed Torrell's fate, as he was now deemed safe and was sent back to Wino, despite previous police and medical records that weren't questioned by any supervisors. When the case was dropped, Wino told the caseworker that Torrell had gotten his injuries from falling and getting into fights at school. The caseworker did not get a police report, never interviewed Torrell or his siblings, never talked to the doctor, never requested medical records, never spoke to Torrell's Head Start teacher to verify whether the child fell or fought a lot in school. She instead took the grandmother's word for it. When Torrell was home with Wino again, she was angry that he had told authorities about her, so she, as well as Torrell's aunt, retaliated with burning his feet by forcing him to stand on a heating grate. This was discovered when he returned to his Head Start class, and his teacher noticed he was not walking normally. His teacher removed his shoes to discover 3rd-degree burns. The burns were so bad that Torrell had to have skin grafts. Skin was removed from his hip and put on the soles of his feet. Even with this, no caseworkers came to investigate. Police were not called, and no charges were made. On January 15, 1998, Torrell's Aunt Terry was feeding him when she said he felt tired. Then Torrell went into cardiac arrest and was taken to Hughes Spalding Hospital, where he died 45 minutes later. He was in such bad shape, the medical examiner could not pinpoint what had killed little Torrell. He had blunt impact injuries on his head, his torso, and extremities. He was starved down to 29 pounds when a 5-year-old boy would normally be around 40 pounds. The medical examiner eventually concluded that blunt force injuries to the head was the cause of Torrell's death. When his teachers and half-sister would testify in court, and after the agency would receive reports, everything Torrell went through would finally be heard. He was beat from head to toe with telephone cords, belts, shoes, and a dog collar. He had cigarette burns on his body. He would have swollen lips and lacerations on his mouth from his aunt forcefully feeding him. Bruises and scars covered his face in different colors depending on the age of the wounds. Farina left feeding instructions for him. He gets a bowl of oatmeal for breakfast. Lunch he gets grits, and dinner he gets grits. His hands are always tied. Torrell had ligature marks on his body after they tied him to a banister with pantyhose. According to Torrell's half-sister, they tied him up a lot. The aunt would force Tasha and Tommy to beat him. Tasha and Tommy would also tell police that Torrell slept on a pallet in the hallway and was tied up when he was bad, and his aunt said that he was always bad. He would be so hungry at school that he would steal food and was once found digging for food in a garbage can. His aunt told teachers not to feed him at school so he wouldn't defecate on the floor. They would dunk him headfirst into the toilet and make him eat waste. In May 1998, a Fulton grand jury indicted Peterson, her daughter Terry Lynn, and her daughter's boyfriend Calvin Pittman for felony murder, aggravated assault, aggravated battery, and cruelty to children. Shortly after Torrell's death, the State Division of Family and Children's Services quietly began an internal investigation to see whether Fulton caseworkers and staff had followed agency policies. In a letter dated February 11, 1998, Sarah Brownlee, then head of social services for the state, informed the agency's top Fulton administrator, Ralph Mitchell, that they had not. Ralph Mitchell's caseworkers had handled only one of the first 7 complaints properly. She criticized his agency for failing to enforce safety plans for the children, to investigate complaints adequately, and to verify what they were told. Ralph Mitchell only gave one public statement, which was an attempt to cover up the wrongdoings done in his Atlanta office. He claimed members of the agency expressed outrage at the loss of precious life, but that they had responded immediately and comprehensively to all allegations of Torrell's abuse and had followed protocol. All of the steps were followed in the case of Torrell. Mitchell then wrote a private memo to the department head at state headquarters, stating the press release was untrue. No one in the media could follow up on this, though, because of the agency's privacy law, which was created originally to protect the children's privacy, would now be used to cover up the department's mistakes. It wasn't until Don Keenan, a lawyer who wanted to sue the state of Georgia on Torrell's behalf, received a file anonymously containing evidence against the DFCS. If it weren't for somebody who just couldn't sleep anymore, who just couldn't live with themselves, that lie would still be sticking, he said. Neither Cheryl Elmore or Ralph Mitchell were fired for what they did, although Ralph was urged to resign and left with his pension. The governor of Georgia, after hearing about the case on a 60 Minutes program, set up a child advocate office with the authority to bypass the state's confidentiality laws and review cases that the DFCS were handling. The state legislature also passed the Torrell Peterson Act, which would give authority to doctors who believed that a child who had come into their care was being abused to take the kids into their temporary custody, something that might have saved Torrell. Torrell was buried at a small cemetery south of Atlanta. He had no mourners, and his headstone was paid for by his attorneys. He is considered the worst case of child abuse in Fulton County. This isn't about falling through the cracks. This is about falling through the crater, said Don Keenan. Keenan had subpoenaed state records in preparation for a lawsuit that he hoped will force the state to reform its child protection system, which was a success in 2002. Don Keenan had this to say, "Thank God he was dead. I think anybody who would have known or understood what this little guy was going through would rejoice in his death."